that's going to be fun. And to achieve that, we've definitely got to optimize what we've got over the remaining tracks. But Budapest showed that we've got a good car when we land it in the right place.
Hi, and welcome to this Akkodis Race Debrief. My name's Jodi, and joining us today we have Shov answering your questions from the Hungarian Grand Prix. Shov, it's been great to see George get another podium and Kimi making his way up the pack to get into points. How are the team feeling now as we head on into the summer break?
It was certainly a stronger weekend from a performance point of view. So it was good that we seem to have got to the bottom of some of the issues that have affected us at the recent races. It was much easier to work with the car as well. So the changes we were making, the car was responding well to it, and the drivers had a lot more confidence to attack the corners. So that was good. Great to see George on the podium, as you say. We could have done a bit more with Kimi though. If we could have qualified a bit better, the race pace that he had on Sunday could have seen him with a very, very strong result. So, as I said, the learning and the understanding is one of the things we're most pleased with.
And you were talking about having confidence with the car there. We've reverted back to the old spec in terms of the rear suspension. Do we know what was fundamentally wrong with the Imola spec that we brought in?
Well, if we make a new suspension, we're doing it to make the car go quicker. And clearly, there's something that wasn't right. There's areas that the drivers said the car was definitely better with that suspension, but when it came to stability in the fast corners, some of the corners where they're having to carry a lot of speed on entry, that they didn't have confidence to push the car like they would like to. So, as I said, we'd always try and make things that improve the pace of the car. This didn't, and a lot of the work that's going on now is to understand exactly what is it that has caused that problem. And it's not something that was dead obvious. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had the issue in the first place. But there'll be a lot of learning in there. Some of it will benefit us this year, but importantly, it'll benefit us for the future.
And with this generation of car, we often hear the term a stable baseline. So is that something when we would revert back? Like, what does that mean in a simplified fashion?
Well, in the most simple sense, when the car's behaving in a nice, stable way, it's quite easy to take a setup from one track, go to the next circuit, and know what you have to do in order to compensate the setup for different weather conditions or different track characteristics. The other thing that's always nice is if you finish with a car on a Friday and it's working well and you don't change anything, it still works well on a Saturday. Now, occasionally you can get cars where without doing anything, suddenly, if the wind changes a little bit, it changes all the handling characteristics. So what we're looking for there is just, a car that's easy for the engineers to understand, for the drivers to understand. It's predictable for the drivers, and its performance doesn't swing wildly with small changes in ambient.
And is that something that we can carry through into the 2026 regulation changes for next year's car, or will it be starting from scratch almost?
Well, the cars for 2026 are very, very different, but there will be a lot of elements, particularly around the learning on suspension, where we should be able to take lessons from this year into next year.
So looking at Sunday's track action, we saw George do the two-stop strategy. Was the one-stop strategy ever considered for him?
Well, it was certainly considered on Sunday morning because almost every race you have a plan A and a plan B. For the one-stop to work, we would have to have seen the degradation come down, which it did. But George was pushing reasonably hard in the first stint to stay on the back of Oscar and Charles, and in doing that, we were pretty much committing to a two-stop strategy. If you're going to drive a one-stop strategy, you want to be doing a bit more management early on, so that when you suddenly get into clear air, you can actually put some decent times in. So, as I said, I think once the race had started relatively early, it was quite evident that with George we were going to commit to that two-stop.
Did we expect to see George catch up with Charles as quickly and seemingly as easy as he did?
Well, based on the first couple of stints, it looked like he was actually a little bit quicker. Now, it always helps if you've got clear air, but he looked pretty strong in those opening stints. The surprise for us was when he got into that third and final stint, the pace didn't seem to be there for him. So you could see that in the opening laps, that it was looking a bit off, and then it seemed to get worse and worse. So once we were, say, 5 or more laps into it, it was pretty evident that he was going to be the target. And it was a bit of a surprise how quickly we were able to catch and pass, but it was a nice surprise.
And we saw Kimi put in a great effort, working his way up through the pack. How's he feeling now? Because he's had a little bit of a stint of being unlucky at races. So has it boosted his confidence? And what's he got to do now over the summer break in order to be ready to come back at it?
Well, as you say, he drove a great race. It's very difficult with the field as tight as it is to be able to make progress, and he was one of few drivers that were able to make a lot of forward progress. How's he feeling? Well, he's much happier with the car now. So from Friday practice, but through into Saturday, into Sunday, you could see that his confidence in the car was growing. It's making a lot more sense to him. And while qualifying didn't quite come together, there were signs, early on being able to get through Q1 on a single lap on the soft tyres. Well, that was definitely encouraging. We just didn't put it together in Q2. We'll work with him on that. But I think that, the main thing for him is just he now feels he's got a car that he can trust, that he can keep learning and building on. He's looking forward to the remainder of the season, and we're hoping that having gone through a period of some difficult races that's almost entirely down to those changes that we made with the suspension, we can hopefully see some stronger races in the final half of the year.
So could a different strategy have benefited Kimi in finishing higher?
I think the strategy was about the best we could have done. What was interesting was with Kimi, we were still thinking it was going to be a two-stop race. The surprise was once he got into clear air on that second stint, how fast he actually was. He was putting in some really, really quick times and was looking like one of the most competitive cars in that race at points. And the tyres were really holding on. So he was doing a very good job of the tyre management. Now, the way the race was panning out, if we did a stop and converted to a 2, we'd have dropped out of the points. We thought it was a long shot doing so many laps on that hard tyre to the finish. But if he could get there and not lose places, well, that would earn him at least 1 point. So that was what we tried to do. There was nothing to lose, really. We hung on there, and he did a brilliant job of managing the tyres, but also some fantastic defending in those final laps to get that point.
And did the cooler temperatures over the weekend, did they play into our hands to benefit us in pace for qualifying and over the race?
It's difficult to say. We certainly looked more competitive in cooler conditions in qualifying than we were in the hotter conditions we had earlier that morning in FP3. The other thing I'd say is that McLaren, when it was hot, looked particularly strong. So they looked like they'd have a pretty easy time at locking out the front row. Well, that isn't what we saw when we came to the cooler track around 35 degrees in qualifying. But that is an area of the car that we're still working to try and improve. It won't be one big step that we take. We'll just be chipping away at it. But hopefully we'll get to a point where we can be competitive in all conditions.
So what are our expectations now as we're leading up to the final 10 races of the season after the summer break, and what are we hoping for? What is our main focus going to be?
Well, there's a few things going on. We've got George looking in a pretty close battle with Max for P3 in the Drivers' Championship. With Kimi, we've seen some excellent race pace, and the focus with him will be making sure we can start him further up the grid, because if we do that, he will just be converting that to a lot of points on a Sunday. We're in a pretty tight battle for second in the Constructors' Championship. So Ferrari just a little bit ahead, Red Bull behind. So that's going to be fun. And to achieve that, we've definitely got to optimize what we've got over the remaining tracks. But Budapest showed that we've got a good car when we land it in the right place. And then hopefully there'll be an opportunity to build on our tally of race wins. So we had a great time in Montreal. There's other circuits that are a bit more like that coming up over the remaining 10 races, and hopefully we'll have a few more highlights.